So this is what we're now calling the Leadership Hour, or at least we'll call it that for a week or so, with Sandi Coryell from Los Angeles and Des Walsh from Gold Coast, Australia, talking about issues around leadership, and especially in these times when leaders are under huge, at all sorts of levels and organizations in society, under a lot of pressure to process vast amounts of information, make decisions quickly, get it right every time, otherwise be exposed in the social media as being incompetent or worse. It's quite a challenge to be an effective leader. And so I thought it'd be interesting. There's a term that gets tossed around called servant leadership. I thought it might be interesting to talk about that. It's a bit of a buzz phrase. What does it mean in practice? And what are some of the challenges? If somebody liked the idea of being a servant leader, and not everybody will like that, what would they do? What would it look like on a day-to-day basis? And how would somebody who wants to try something different, because what they're doing at the moment isn't working with their team or whatever, how would they explore this idea of servant leadership? I mean, I can think of examples like Martin Luther King and, those sorts of people spring to mind. Think of some more people. We sort of skirt around this business of political leaders because I don't want to get into partisan disputes about the current presidential campaign, but or pre-presidential campaign, I suppose you'd have to call it. The phony war that's going on. But you think of people like Jimmy Carter, who is still serving, even though he's not in public office, doing all sorts of good things. An amazing man who, by many people's accounts, wasn't a great president, but it still goes on providing a great example of service. What are your thoughts about servant leadership, Sandi? I know I've sprung it on you, but
no, that's okay. My focus obviously is bigger organizations, mid to larger size organizations. Yeah. So when I look at the word in that realm, as opposed to in a nonprofit or in a situation where you're elected, or it truly is an opportunity for servant leadership when it's much more of a corporate business environment, I have an ambivalent relationship with the word, because if you go down the list of everything that servant leadership has in it, I can't argue with 99% of it. The idea of community and empathy and wanting to help people grow and listen to inviting people's opinions when you're making decisions. I think those are all so incredibly important to 21st century leadership. Yeah. Where I get ambivalent about the purest sense of the word servant leadership is that in a corporate environment, somebody ultimately has to make those decisions. Yep. And while I think most would argue that command and control leadership has a waning place in business today. Yep. I think that those are two extremes: servant leadership and command and control when you're talking about a business environment. I think that we're probably leaning more and more toward servant leadership. Brian is saying there's a level of humility that's involved in those who are classified as servant leaders, because most will say the work is not about them, but the goal being accomplished. Absolutely. Yep, sure. Absolutely. And I think that that's one of I worked for a company for years, and they never called it servant leadership, but it was an advertising agency, so creativity was big there, but it was always creativity with humanity. And I think that was a model that I obviously became very familiar with, and it was about it was a bit of a combination. There was a recognition that there were leaders who were going to make the ultimate decisions, but the ones who succeeded the best were people who were nice people, who really did have that aspect of humility and that aspect of all working to a bigger goal and wanting to grow people's careers as much as they wanted to achieve their annual numbers. So I think that it's hard is an absolute one way or the other. The corporate example that I know about is the CEO of Popeyes. Let me see, I pulled up, I wanted to remember her name exactly, Cheryl Batchelder, talked about that some of the turnaround that she had was because they really switched over to the idea of servant leadership in that organization. So a long way of saying, I think that I value so much of what is in there, but I'm ambivalent that some of it can be effective. You know, part of servant leadership is not only asking for opinions about decisions, but letting employees really have a strong say in that. And I think that ultimately, in a business environment where you have to also serve your stakeholders,
yes, that's important.
Someone has to take responsibility for that ultimate decision, and that's where I think you start getting that gray area of the absolute term of servant leadership and how most companies can practice it.
That's great. And I'm thinking also, this was my thought as I went for my walk this morning, that the leadership and culture are like in a symbiotic relationship for good or ill. And if you're in a very traditional hierarchical sort of organization, which is especially in manufacturing or in a more traditional business, maybe banking, whatever, then as a leader, you probably have to exercise more of a command and control type of leadership than of, say, servant leadership. There's a limit to how much an individual leader, even a CEO, can, in a short space of time at least, change that culture. So you can it's like they say, it's harder to turn an ocean liner around than a little sailing boat. So it depends, where the leader comes in. I mean, and you made the point. It's very interesting that somebody who comes in and then tries to change the culture will lose some people, because some people are not going to want to work with that kind of leader. But then a leader can and should be doing something about the culture. They have a responsibility to make sure that the culture is congruent with the objectives of the business, and that's serving the shareholders and it's serving the employees too. And if they see an inadequate or dysfunctional culture, it's their job to change that. And part of that change might be to get a recognition. Now, I was given a great link, and I've put it aside here, by a guy I was having a long conversation over dinner with a couple of weeks ago, and he sent me this link from Spotify, and this is a kind of whole servant leadership just gets mentioned in passing, but it's a very interesting little video which explains how they work. And servant leadership makes sense in terms of their culture and mode of operating as a newer tech company, and probably a lot of younger people working there. So it's more collaborative, and it's more adaptable, flexible in the way it operates. So I think I'll let the video speak for itself. But they mention servant leadership as part of them, and I think that was an interesting distinction I got in watching that last night. Was servant leadership will be easier to achieve for a leader if it's sits well with the culture. It's harder if there's if everybody's expecting someone to just make decisions in regards, having conversations with underlings as being a waste of time or worse. It's going to be harder.
I think that's part of the challenge with it as you're coming up through the ranks is the humility that Brian talked about is, if when you're at a mid-level manager and you're vying for that next promotion, servant leadership really is about sharing the.
Yeah.
And I think that if servant leadership isn't recognized as a primary aspect of what you're going to be judged on, you may disappear a little bit. If you've got a leader who's looking at 5 people, and you've got one servant leader, and the other people in there are making a name for themselves.
Yep.
Can the servant leader be seen and be heard? And and they will be if the culture recognizes that as a valuable asset. But if they don't, it's tougher.
And I think, and let's face it, women are more vulnerable to being disadvantaged by exercising servant leadership, especially with a bunch of alpha males who have no problem, ordering people around and bullying people and trumpeting their achievements.
I think
you know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about. I'm trying to, I can go down that road easily, but I'll try and restrain. I'll keep it on servant leadership.
I'm sure some of those guys tried to take you on at their cost at times.
They tried. I think that's why you in most companies that in the 21st century, where I consider it modern leadership.
Yeah.
I do think that more and more people are adapting it and see the benefits of it. One of the aspects of servant leadership, or not one of them, but you are building that community, and there is an inherent trust that has to exist.
Trust is very important
for servant leadership to really work, and that takes time.
Yes.
And it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds, because if you look at how long people actually stay at companies these days, if you have short lifespans at companies, how do you develop that trust? How do you integrate into the community and believe that, yes, I will be rewarded based on this? And if you're not going to be there for 5-10 years, is that a benefit for you, or is it not?
Now, why don't we bring Brian in if you'd like to take a seat?
I'd love
Brian,
to have
would you
Brian
like to hop in? Come and join us. So it's not just Sandi and me. And I'm going to send a little bird.
Did you want to come in, Brian? Or, you might not. Okay, cool. I was going to say, if you don't, it's cool too.
Yeah, okay, when you're ready. So that's an important point about trust. And I was reading a little while ago, I might have mentioned one of our earlier conversations, that one of the things that people of an older generation who are in leadership positions need to know, if they have millennials are working with them, as they will increasingly, what we call in Australia the Gen Ys, that if they're making a mistake if they demand trust in the business, in the company, but they don't show trust in those people. And the kind of message is, before I can trust you, I need to know you trust me.
Absolutely.
And if a lot of rules are set in place, like social media, you can't access your Facebook page during work hours. That's lack of trust. That says, I don't trust you to use this in a responsible way. You can't use your Twitter account during business hours. That says, I don't trust you. And one of the things that a lot of older business owners, executives don't grasp is that that's like saying, come to work and we'll tie one hand behind your back and do the best you can, because they can't stay connected with their network because it's their lifeblood, So they take them off social, and then they wonder why they leave. They go to a company that's got more enlightened policy.
I think anybody today needs that. Here comes Brian.
Yeah.
Hi.
Howdy,
hey, Brian.
How you doing?
So
good.
So, Brian, where are you calling in from?
I'm from Virginia Beach.
Ah. East Coast.
Yes.
Tell me, forgive my ignorance, tell me which state that's in.
Virginia.
It's in Virginia. Okay, I guessed, but I wanted to be sure. And what's your professional activity or business activity?
Well, currently I'm a stay-at-home father and full-time student, so
Right.
that's what I'm currently doing.
What are you studying, Brian?
Business administration.
Oh, awesome. So this is I would guess you've got interest in this from business, and you also have Preach's kid.
Yes.
So how do you combine those two things?
Well, born and raised a son of a preacher. Spent a little time in ministry myself. Prior to getting married, and so I've had a little bit of experience in that area. But since the I guess you would call it the economic downturn,
right,
and loss of my job, I've had the privilege of being able to go back to school, and so this has allowed me to get better acquainted with a lot of the things such as servant leadership and other business terms.
What's some of your thoughts on it?
So,
sorry, Des.
I'll just see, we've got also the Reverend Noreen Davis has joined us. Might like to jump in. Who else have we got?
Cook?
Kurt? Who'd like to take a seat? I'm not sorry, Brian, didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, not a problem.
See if anybody else would like to call in. So there's an article in today in a business magazine we have here, which is called Boss, and it's part of it's a business magazine, comes out once a month with one of our financial papers, newspapers, and they have an article in that with the guy with the baby in his arms saying, "Stay-at-home dads are real men." They're sort of trying a bit of a campaign to get some sharing going on there. No, carry on, Brian.
So I think from my understanding is basically what I have had previously mentioned in the comment section, where I feel like there's a certain level of humility that's involved with servant leadership, because you essentially are making it not really about yourself, but you're making it about the ultimate goal that you want to accomplish, because you want to really focus on the end results. You want to be sure that you're giving of yourself to be sure that your people can accomplish the things that they need to fulfill. I think one of the people that I've considered able to do that well would probably be John Maxwell, as someone who basically empowers others through a lot of the things that he teaches people in leadership, and basically he gives of himself in that avenue by basically mentoring, teaching, training leaders how to lead.
Tell me about John Maxwell, because the name's not familiar to me.
Basically, he's one of the top motivational speakers. Many people, he's from the Atlanta area, and so he's known as one of the top. I think he actually is the top ranked motivational speaker currently in ranking. And so basically he speaks to a lot of businesses, a lot of international companies, a lot of world leaders, and in areas of leadership skills and training them and their corporations how to best implement leadership in their business structures.
Right. Maxwell, one of Maxwell's very popular books is The 360 Leader. They got leaders on all levels, and you're supporting each other. I like the idea of Maxwell comes from a perspective of really every level you've got leadership. And I think he might come from a...
You're revealing my profound ignorance of this man, Sandi. I've obviously
he's an American, Des. So.
That's all right. He hasn't joined the cavalcade of Americans coming here to teach us about business.
Not.
Go on.
No, go ahead, Braden.
No, I was going to say, I think another one of his books, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, also speaks to a lot of that as well. There's one that I'm currently reading for one of my classes that deals with leadership. It's called the Leadership Challenge. And within it, it talks about there's 5 key principles that most great leaders have, and one is that they inspire leaders, inspire the people that they're leading to do well. I'm forgetting the other 4 at the moment, but there's like 5 key things that they focus on, and one is inspiring their people to do well. They're givers of themselves. Self-sacrificing, and I'm drawing a blank at the moment. If I actually have to,
that's okay.
All right,
I think all of the ideas are similar to servant leadership, where where you really are. It really is about that idea of serving. I have to balance it out in the corporate world. I liken it a bit to parent and child. Do you want, I'll take the other side of it. Do you want your parent to be your parent, or do you want them to be your friend and be part of the group? Because there are times when I think you got to step up. And that's where I think servant leadership has some challenges in the corporate world.
Is it the servant leadership or the connotations of the word as being self-effacing, can't make a decision?
No. Well, I think it's that part of servant leadership in the purest sense is that it is collaborative, and decision making is a collaborative exercise, and the leader isn't necessarily the one that makes the decision. It's you're engaging your team, your people in making that decision, and and that's where, if you take it to the letter of what it means, and I don't know that most people do.
You still need the Harry Truman. The buck stops here, don't you? Somebody's got to wear it eventually.
Right, and that's what I was thinking. Because
Brian froze there.
If you go to the point of sacrificing, there's a level of saying, okay, if something does go wrong or something doesn't work out the way we intended to, I'm going to take the accountability for the actions that happen. Yeah, I think I still have a blended view with when you've got numbers that you have to hit, and somebody has to, especially when things move fast. You can't always engage the community in making the decision. Sure. So I think that in some industries lend themselves more to being able to be more full bloom with servant leadership, and others, just by the nature of how they function and how you have to structure to move things through and to be a flourishing business, it's difficult to be to the absolute 100% letter of what it is.
No. But if you go back to the point of trust, and you say, anybody in a leadership position sometimes has to make a snap decision, and their career can depend on it, the business can depend on it, but the decision has to be made. So if you have trust, you can go back to your team and say, normally I would have called everybody together and we'd have discussed this and workshopped it and whiteboarded it. I had to make a decision. I had 1 minute to make a decision. And these are the factors I took into account. And now we have to just wait and see if that's going to be a disaster or a success. Now, I think if there's trust, then, and if you don't do that too often, that could be good. I had a chairman once, and I I was the CEO, and what happened was that I'd approved something which was above the delegated authority that I had. It was an expenditure. And this was drawn to my attention. So I went to the chairman, who had a higher authority than I did to sign things, like a higher amount. And I said, I've goofed, I've done something wrong here. I didn't realize, I should have known. And the only way out of this is for you to authorize it. And I handed over, took the piece of paper, and he signed it. And he said, "You won't do that again, will you?"
Exactly.
So he trusted me enough to let that go, but it wasn't going to happen again. Next time I'd swing for it.
Right. We have a few new people have come in, Des. I mean, Fred has come in. Coryell has come in.
Last time we got Fred to jump in, he took me by surprise. So someone else might like this to take a seat.
I wanted to ask you, Sandi.
Yes,
you had mentioned something in regards to the differentiation of how that looks in the corporate world versus nonprofit, and if you can kind of go into more detail about that.
Well, I've never worked in the nonprofit sector, but when I look at it from the outside looking in, when you truly are elected to serve the people who put you in that position, you are serving that constituency. That is your job. But when you're in the corporate world, you're not elected into that position, and you have to keep in mind that part of who you're serving are those stakeholders above you. Whether it's Wall Street or your CEO or your customers. There's so many different people that you do have to serve, that only serving your employees or prioritizing it can be difficult. I'm not saying that it can't happen by any means. And I think that the more you're able to do that, the more those other things take care of themselves. When you have a good portion of your leadership as servant leadership, even in a corporate environment, you are going to develop that community, that respect, and that people become more motivated because they see that you're really helping them take care of their careers and that you care about them. And that has a huge positive impact on what you're able to accomplish for all of those other stakeholders. But I think some of it is the absolute idea of you are a servant. I still lean towards I want my leader to lead and have I think you were here when I talked about I worked for a company where it was about leading with humanity, and that for me in a corporate environment just sat a little bit more productively in the industry that I was in. You still had 90% of what servant leadership is was present there, but it was still the idea that the leader was the leader.
I think there's another aspect to it, and I hear what you're saying, Sandi. I think there's another aspect to it, and I'm reminded of it by Fred about being here, mentioning on a previous discussion the idea of as I recall it, Fred, correct me if I'm wrong, the leader eats last.
Right.
That that you think of your team, your group, your company, whatever it is, first. That's a framing of the decisions. Whereas we know that there are people who get into leadership positions and they are really kind of they're there to get the best they can out of it before they get fired, or before they move on to the next place they're going to pillage. And they're like, some people, we know that some people rise to high positions and they're not psychologically what we'd call really sound or dedicated to others, so sometimes it's very hard to work with those people, but there is an ideal to strive for, right. I think, of being of service And in certain circumstances, you're going to have to deal with some of those rogues, and maybe you have to be much more assertive.
Pastor Terrell, we've got some great comments going on over here. Pastor Terrell and Fred. Pastor Terrell has one that is intriguing me. He goes, "This is very uncommon. Most pastors set a culture to eat first and best." I would love to hear more about that. I think that intrigues me. I'd love to know.
It intrigues me too.
I'd love to know the framework.
That sounds a radical statement. Yeah.
I'd love to hear that. And Fred is saying,
we like some radical statements.
And then Fred is saying another aspect of it is mission first. People always, but mission is always paramount.
That's great distinction, Fred. As always, thank you.
Hey, thanks for jumping in.
No problem. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks.
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
And where are you hailing from?
Right now, I'm calling from my hotel room in Redondo Beach. I'm away at a church planning conference.
You're close to me. I'm in the valley.
Okay.
I'm about 35 miles from you.
Where's your usual base of operation?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And so we do things quite differently at our church, and are trying to not necessarily dispel certain church cultures, but just not do things just because that's traditionally how it always been done, if it doesn't have a specific, purposeful, or relevant value today. And so every week we have dinner, we fellowship on purpose. Of what I say, and there's strength in fellowshipping over broken bread or dinner together. And they just out of the normal of the culture, they normally want to fix my plate, serve me first. And, come on, Pastor, get in line, get your food, and not take that opportunity each time to say leaders eat last. And just it's a subconscious thing. I really do practice it, but also it's a servant leader type of mentality of teaching them and preparing them for leadership as well.
Symbolism is very important for leadership. Symbolic actions, even though it might be easier to say, "Oh, okay, I'll go in."
Yeah, absolutely. Because the reality is, if all the food run out, I would feel awful having eaten, and some of them didn't. So I want to be able to do that. And then even when I feed my family, my wife and 4 kids, I want to make sure there's times I've fed them and have not eaten or had to go fix myself something separate because it was all that I gave to them. And so humility and leadership, for somehow those principles just really became fleeting because we became so puffed up by our knowledge as leaders that now all of a sudden we don't know how to really function as in a humble way.
So
and still have the confidence of leadership.
Sorry.
And still have the confidence of leadership.
So what can I put this to you? Say I'm a member of I have the privilege of being a member of your congregation, and I come to you and I say, "Pastor, I understand what you're saying about servant leadership, and that's great for you because you're a pastor and you've got this whole structure, support, kind of cultural support with this in this community to practice that, and we respect that." I'm in a sort of hard-edged corporate environment, and every day is a bit of a jungle. How can I practice servant leadership in any way that makes sense?
That's a great question. I'm bivocational. I also work to live. I'm not a full-time pastor. So I do have opportunities every day to exemplify that in work.
So like St. Paul made sails so he could preach at night. Or tents.
Yeah, absolutely. I describe it as my Superman and my Clark Kent job. And so my work that I do by day is my Clark Kent job, and my Superman job is the pastor. But the beauty of that Superman analogy is that Clark Kent worked at a place that put him in an opportunity to hear when he was needing to be used. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happens on the job, where if I'm not out there with the people, I don't have opportunities to hear where my use as a pastor can come into fruition. So I often find myself pastoring my bosses, and people will come by to get advice from me, relationship advice and things like that. And I don't keep a Bible on my desk or anything like that. It's just somehow it circulates that I'm a minister, I'm a pastor. I never wear like clergy to work or anything ridiculous. But I do uphold a standard of behaviors, and when it comes time to lead and help others, I usually try to be first in line to set a good precedent.
That's great. Do we have anybody else like to jump in with us? So Fred says the battlefield axiom that officers eat last has been modified in the modern battlefield to officers eat last, but they're the first to get fresh batteries. I like that. So do we anyway, so if there's somebody else like to jump in, just click on that seat. So this is fascinating. I think that the what was I trying to say? Say something, Sandy, while I get my thoughts together.
Well, I'm going to say something, partly because you're talking about a pastor, and we were talking a little earlier that servant leadership can take a while to take root because of community. But with what you just said, I'm in a mastermind group, and somebody who's in there with me is studying to be a pastor. And we were at dinner one night. We do our mastermind at dinner, and he said, I think we need to all write notes to our waitress and hand them to her and just thank her for the service that she gave us tonight. And we did that, and it was like we could see her off to the side, and it instantaneously, you talk about somebody who there was an instant connection between us. She came over to our table, and it just instantly made her feel proud. It made her feel connected to us. When you think about that, those small little things that leaders do, that if a leader did that with their people, you can quickly make those type of connections and those type of differences in how much somebody is going to give for their job and have, be part of that team. So it just is what came to mind when you were talking about how quickly you can make that impact. If you do look at it, is how can I serve this person in the moment?
I agree. That's great. Great story. While you're talking, I was thinking of a blog post I wrote some time ago, which came out of an experience of mine. I was having a challenge as a CEO with a chairman that I had who liked the limelight, but if things went wrong, it was my fault, and he wouldn't take responsibility. And I talked to a friend of mine who was in the corporate world, and he said, "Oh, you've got a fair weather leader." And I said, "Explain that." And he said, "Oh, they're the ones who love to be upfront when things are going well, but when things are not going well, it wasn't their fault. It's you. You're the CEO. You got it wrong." Mm-hmm. So he said, "You've got to learn to deal with this." And I said, "Okay, tell me." And he said, when you have a success, you say, we're going really well. We just achieved this. So you include him in it. When things are not going well, you say, I'm not doing very well here. I need your help. Because his instinct will be to say, no, it wasn't me. Right. If you say we, in the bad situation, he's going to back off. So I then, in my career after that, I started to look for the leaders who were not fair weather leaders, the ones who would stick with you. And I had one guy in particular who would, even if you got it really wrong, would say, thanks for briefing me on that. And then he would step up and wear it. And then he'd have a conversation with me later, but he knew he was responsible. Now that to me was servant leadership, and it was very authoritative, and he was commanding sort of person, but he did not let you. He would not hang his people out to dry if he could solve the situation. To me, that was servant.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, sure, fine. That's end of speech.
I think that leadership is wildly important. But do you guys feel that, one, everyone should be a leader, and two, that how do we as a culture, even as leaders, teach fellowship? Because fellowship, we can't lead without followers, and the people have a problem with the idea of even being or calling themselves a follower.
Yep.
Do you want to jump in, Des, or do you want me to?
No, you go.
I tend to respond from the business world sense, and there are some people that are more comfortable being followers, and that's where they want to be. And I don't think that everybody wants to be a leader. So, but it is true. You have to have followers if you want to accomplish something. As a business leader, what I try and do is to give people the confidence and the comfort and the ability to be a leader at the level that they're comfortable to be a leader at. And that may just be leading themselves. It may be leading one or two other people. But those who do want to be able to go and lead more and more people, then you want to develop it so that they do know what it takes to value these people who are, as you put it, their followers, and know how to treat them properly. So I don't think that everybody is a leader of many. I think we do seem to be in a world where there's much more value put on leader than on somebody who chooses not to take that path. And I don't think that that's necessarily, I don't think you have to be a leader to bring value to the organization, the community. But
yeah. I'm just wanting to report on interesting comments being made in the chat thing. Brian says, so the true servant leader isn't throwing people under the bus, which I'd agree. Fred says, I've always found the term servant leadership to be a curious term. Technically, all forms of leadership are servant leadership to one degree or another. Yep. Brian says, there's potential in everyone to be a leader, but the capacity to develop that might take work and time. And Fred says, if everybody is leading, nobody is leading.
Right. I agree with all that. The thing I would say with Brian is, one of the things that I found is everybody does have the potential, but I don't think everybody has the desire to be a leader.
I agree. Yeah.
And
a lot of people just say, just tell me what to do, where to stand. Right. I'm happy. Yeah.
But what happened? When did the word follower become derogatory?
I agree with you. I don't think it is derogatory. Yeah. I think that you can contribute so much to whatever that community is you're part of, whether it's your church or whether it's your town or your work organization, your team. You can contribute without having to take on a responsibility that you're not comfortable with. And I don't think it is. I agree with you that I think it has become a bit of we focus so much on leadership right now, and it is important, but it's not, I don't think it's a dirty word to be a follower. I think if that's where your value to the group is, then that's a huge value.
Mm-hmm.
So can I just ask another question, which is, are leaders born or made?
I'll let you take that one, Terrell. That's like the giant McGilla question.
Just a little question. Not much implication.
I don't think that leaders. It's really hard because even as I've raised 4 of my children, they seem to have been inborn. They seem to have been born with innate characteristics, very different from one another. And even my stepchildren, who have never met their father, yet have traits of theirs. You know, and so there are things just that are a part of us genetically, strengths, dominances, there's even spiritual implications behind that. So to some degree, yes, but I would say for the most part, no. It is a nurtured aspect, because that spirit, that dominance, or whatever it is that would cause one to be a leader, can most certainly be quenched and pushed down and suppressed. And if they don't come to an awareness of their identity, then no, it doesn't even come into fruition.
Well,
I could be wrong.
Fred quotes a famous Roman, Marcus Aurelius: "One cannot lead until one proves their mettle as a follower." Interesting. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to go back to your question, Des, and this isn't it's not totally congruent, but I was just reading something on the work that
we try not to be too congruent here.
I'm going to make you very.
We don't want to get too
I'm
rigid.
Make you very happy, and I'm also going to be a bit vague because I haven't committed the study to memory. But I was reading something that was asking whether grit is, another popular word these days, which my grandmother would call it stick to it, or stay with it. Whether that's something that you can teach or whether it's just bred into you. And neuroscience is actually looking at how the brain functions in different people and how they respond in different situations. And they've noticed that there are differences in different people as to how the brain works together to be able to persevere in the face of obstacles. But then what they also found is that, and this goes a bit to what Coryell was saying, is if you nurture it, is that you can improve it by simulating and actually giving people the experience that you have to work through, and you can close that gap between those people who just naturally have it and those who don't. By actually doing it and having to face it, you can start to close the gap. He's fascinated by it, apparently. It was not congruent enough.
No, it's
okay. So
guys,
thank you so much for having me tonight. I've got to get to it.
Thanks for jumping in. Appreciate it. It's great stuff.
You're very welcome. I'm going to follow you both, and if I see you on,
I followed you too. I'm really interested. I'd love to next time be able to talk a little bit more.
You made a great.
You should come into some of my Bible blabs. We have them every Tuesday and Thursday night.
I followed you, so I should get the notice. You're welcome.
All right, great.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You take care. Thank you. Okay, so right. So follow.
You want to jump on, Fred? You've got some great comments on the side there.
Nature. Every study of the last 50 years says that one personality type is more prone to leadership than another has been debunked or disproved.
And I agree with that. It was something else that just came out of this neuroscience conference that was talking about, are introverts or extroverts more inclined to be leaders? And basically they said at most it accounts for 20% of your ability. So totally agree with that.
And Walter says, leadership takes me back to the days I was in the military. You are trained and conditioned. And I think that's another thing. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we were talking about the fact that, sometimes you get, this goes back, I think some leadership skills can be taught. So if we've relied too much on, the kind of idea of the naturally charismatic leader who then proves to be incompetent in the particular situation, they may not have had the training to deal with the particular kind of situation. But athletes, high-performing people often do things and they look back and say, I'm not sure how I did that. How they did it was they were trained or conditioned to a certain point where it was kind of muscle memory took over or something. You know, there was some part of them knew what to do, and they just acted.
Well,
and but without all that training or that conditioning, they might not have done that. And then they're held up as great leaders, but it wasn't they didn't deliberate about
I think
it. You know? Is that making
yeah,
sense?
it absolutely does. And I think it's one of the challenges that you see in business is that military or sports have an advantage, because a lot of companies, not all of them, but a lot of companies focus on training. But the real behavior change and that real ability comes with the conditioning. It comes with that ongoing reinforcement, and it's not just the training part, it's the conditioning part. There's Fred. Hey, Fred.
Hi there, Fred.
Even does. Even Sandy.
Nice to see you.
Your team's not going so well tonight, is that right?
Oh, no, I was watching them for a while, but there's a break between the second and third period, and they're vastly disappointing me. But when people start talking about militaries having a certain advantage over leadership, yes, there's a certain degree of truth to that, but it's not so much the fact that we do it better than somebody else. It's the fact that we're consistent about it.
Right. It's the conditioning. You condition.
Okay.
No, we condition people. We put them under enormous mental and physical stress, because it's a lot of fun, but also because we are trying to inculcate them to make decisions or be a good leader under harsh conditions. Anybody can lead from the barrack block. Anybody can lead from garrison, right?
Yeah.
The guy who's popular in garrison may not necessarily be the guy you want at the pointy end of the stick. That's why we train hard. But one thing that
that's when things go well, people say training kicked in. I've heard. Oh yeah,
that's absolutely, and very handy in ambushes when you don't have time to think, as an example. And then yes, you do go back and say, "Gee, how did I go through that decision-making process?" And I only mention this because I was doing a chat at Queen's University not too long ago on this subject, when people were saying, "Well, why are you seeing certain differences between the business world and the military world in terms of leadership training?" And I say it's consistency. So regardless of where you are and what military you are, most of our militaries, certainly in the Commonwealth, certainly in the U.S., certainly in the West, follow certain rules. We teach people certain procedures. We teach them how to do estimates. We teach them how to do in the same way. There are certain range gates. Before you get to command certain things, you will have taken certain advanced leadership courses. You will have gone to command and general staff colleges and things like that. So we're constantly, pushing training at you, but we've been doing it the same way for a number of times. And all your peers in peer leadership positions have also been going through the exact same training. So there's consistency. So when I sit at board level sometimes and I'm having conversations with people, one of the first things I say is, I'm not sure how you people are having a conversation, because you two guys went to Harvard, you two guys went to Cornell, you two guys went to Yale, and you two guys went to Queen's, and you all learned the same things using different languages. Or you learned certain flavors of leadership. Because people love attaching adjectives to the word leadership, and so they can brand it and sell it or whatever, right? And you see all sorts of, one of the more interesting one was a guy from Yale say, yes, I studied values-based leadership. And I said, really? Wow. So obviously you didn't study English either, because I'd like you to tell me what valueless-based leadership is. So whenever someone uses an adjective, put it to the null hypothesis to see if it actually works.
You are so tough, Fred.
No, I'm not hired to be the nice guy.
I see that.
Just another perk of the job. But the like you know Donna Carlin, she gets hired to be the nice person. I get hired not to be the nice person. So yeah, when you have people in military, so when I was a squadron or a battery commander, all my other peers have been trained the exact same way. So there is some consistency there. Yeah. In the commercial world, in the private sector, there isn't a lot of consistency. Some guys invested heavily in their professional development. Some have not. So you have that schism there. The other sort of aspect is normally there's certain range gates you go through before we let you take our sons and daughters into harm's way. And sometimes you don't see those same sort of parallel range gates. People say, oh, I like the cut of that guy's jib, or he was really good in sales, so I'm now going to put him into a VP sales position. Okay, he may be good at sales. It doesn't necessarily mean he should be running your entire sales division. And if so, what investments have you put into that guy's education, that guy's experience? It's great to be a leader of a team of 1, but now if you have a sales team of 50, is he the right guy for it?
Yeah.
Right. So, there's those sorts of things. And I just, be careful tarring things with the same brush around here. I do believe, and Marcus Aurelius says, you should not lead unless you've proven your mettle as a leadership. And he essentially did that to all his sons, too, if you remember. Made all his sons, even though they were born of high station, served as common Roman foot soldiers for 1 year, which I thought was interesting.
There's an interesting thing a point you make about training, because I remember speaking with a young guy who was a private in the Australian Army, and he was, what was his specialty? I've gone blank, but he put his he was. He said he was going to train as something like a baker, or he was going to train as an electrician, whatever it was. He wanted to develop the particular. And he said, and I said, oh, so how would you do that? And he said, well, the Army's terrific at training. They just provide, really clear instruction, take it step by step. He wasn't university material, as you'd say, but he respected the fact that that the Army would teach him how to do something and do it properly. I found that quite impressive.
Well, militaries are very good at investment in training, investments in education.
Yeah.
And we've also learned that education is only, half the solution, because a lot of cases you end up giving a guy lots of information, but does he have the character to lead? There's a number of times where you've now spent 6 or 7 years putting this kid through university. He comes out with a master's degree. He's now in his basic officer's training, and he gets it. He's a very smart guy. All right.
Yeah.
But at somewhere in the middle of that training, you have to give him a quarter and say, go call your mom and tell her you're not going to be an officer in the Royal Canadian Artillery, because you're a great guy. You're very smart, but you are not going to command combat troops. Now, since we've paid for all this training, we'll find something else for you to do, but it's not going to be in this particular line of work.
Yeah.
Some guys are better suited to be pilots. Some guys are better to be suited as artillery officers, tank commanders, infantry, logisticians, or whatever. But there are certain character sets that we do look for. And I would say, well, if of course it's an ethics or values failure, then immediately, here's your quarter. Go call your mom, and the bus station's over that way. One thing that we do share, I think, with the private sector is, sometimes we'll promote a guy to his level of incompetence. And say, okay, well, obviously you peaked here, but we're going to keep you in this position. No, we've actually gotten better at this, saying, okay, no, you're going to go shine a chair with your ass in Ottawa for next few years until you retire. But that does happen. That's nature of the beast of any institution, I think.
I must share with you, this is not so much about leadership, but this is about transition from the military to the private sector. And a man I knew who's sadly passed away now, but he was commander in the Australian Navy, and he was an artillery guy, a gunnery guy. So he had the most incredible knowledge of that field, and he was quite highly respected in the Navy. But he went on to a private sector board, and there are a couple of people there, he said, who were a bit resentful because he wasn't from their little clique of people in that particular industry. And one person on the other side of the table was being quite hostile to him, in the first meeting of the board he attended.
Probably not a good idea, but okay, yeah.
And said to him, what particular skills do you think you bring to this company? And he said, I just looked at him and I said, I know how to kill battleships over the horizon.
Yeah, which actually, when you think about it, is a reasonably complex skill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have sometimes run into that. I've been in the private sector now for 5 years, and occasionally, maybe 2 or 3 times, it's only happened to me, and never by the people who hired me. No. Right? So we have a little sit down, say, okay, if you have a prejudice with me, just basically out of that, I'm kind of wondering what other prejudices you harbor from a spectral point of view in your entire company. Yeah. Right off the bat. So if you have a problem with me right now, there's warning bells going off. And I've been brought into your company in 1 or 2 things. Either your boss has brought me in to sort something out. The private capitalists have hired me to come into this company before they give you money. So if I were you, I'd kind of change your attitude. Now, if they continue getting incensed, I would say, let me tell you a little bit about my military career. And generally they calm down a bit after that.
Yeah.
So, you are moving into polite society now. It's not like when you were in the military where you come from when you're in the military, you come from an organization that does not suffer fools gladly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where you might move into another institution now where sometimes they're tolerated to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Every organization has its assholes.
Sure.
How you deal with them, of course, is a little bit different.
Yeah.
I won't get into the details, but let's just say it's usually rarely a problem.
So I was just checking the conversation chat room, and we've done an hour. Sandy, do you want to keep going or?
I'll open a seat for somebody now. I mean,
no, we've got a spare seat there, Fred. If somebody else would like to jump in.
Well, can I ask you, Fred? Other than the fact that it is a label, it is servant leadership is an adjective. The servant is an adjective. To your point earlier, ahead of leadership. What's your opinion on the whole idea of servant leadership?
I think it depends how people use it. I've seen a lot of friends who do nonprofits, NGOs, IGOs, and say, "I'm a servant leader," and I say, well, "Okay, well, great. Call yourself Kowalski for all I care." It's a name, it's a brand. But when you really look at it, I think when you tear away the veneer of an adjective, and you get back to those 10 basic principles of leadership, and they're as important whether you're running a company of 10 or whether you're running a company of 1,000. Those things don't change.
Right.
And servant leadership means that you take care of your troops from a military perspective. And we always take care of our troops. In fact, if you go back to one of the quintessential writers on leadership in the modern era, Sir William Slim, for him, know your troops, know your people, promote their welfare at all times, as long as it does not interfere with the accomplishment of your mission, is his third principle is leadership. The first two is, I always keep this one taped up here. It always seems to come out in our conversation. Achieve professional competence. Appreciate your own strengths and limitations, and pursue continuous self-improvement. Well, those are part of the first two you should do before you be leading anybody. But and the next principle is know your people, promote their welfare. I used to love the U.S. When I was an instructor with the U.S. Army on an exchange program. I was teaching U.S. Army officers and U.S. Marine Corps officers in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And right up there in front of TRADOC headquarters, a great big sign was "Mission first, people always." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In my mind, that was the best description of servant leadership. As Ded was saying before, hey, sometimes you don't have time for the kumbaya moment around the campfire. You got to make decisions, and your mission is always paramount, but it's always people as well. And I always found that there's a good equitable balance in there. Servant leadership is about people, and it's always about your people, and it's mission before self. Can you have self-centered leadership? I don't think so.
Don't think so.
Nick's got some great comments over there. Did you want to jump in, Nick, or you just want?
Nick's put his hand up to join in.
Or Ian?
Oh no, Ian's got in first. Hi, Ian.
Hey, Ian.
I'm going to fix my volume up. You've all gone quiet, as often happens on Blab.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now I'm with you.
So you're from my part of the world, Ian, I think.
You've done well on the accent detection meter, barometer. I'm in Melbourne. Where are you, Des?
In Melbourne. I'm
Okay.
on the Gold Coast.
Okay, very closer than most people in the world.
Closer than Sandi and I or Fred and I are, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So Sandi's from Los Angeles and Fred's from
Ottawa.
I know
Ottawa.
from Canada, from Ottawa. I was going to say Toronto, and then I thought, no, it's Ottawa. Ottawa, right?
It's
And-
okay. Everybody thinks everybody from Canada comes from Toronto, so you're good to go. It's like Canadians saying all Australians come from Sydney, so don't worry about it.
Well, Ottawa's the one place in Canada I've been to, so I should have thought Ottawa. Yeah,
Yes.
had a nice. Yeah. Okay. So Ian, tell us about yourself. What you do.
Okay, what I do, I do a couple of things. One of the things I do is very large-scale IT, information technology.
Yeah.
I've worked in companies like IBM and our biggest telco, Telstra, and places like that. And over the last 5 years, I've found myself in the entrepreneurial world and have been doing a fair amount of business coaching. So applying that strategic leadership I've learnt in corporate land and bring it down to a smaller business context. And what I do on Blab mostly is around the public speaking arena, because a lot of business owners don't realise they need to be talking to more people, and how you do that strategically with conviction, purpose, and all those other things to move people to act, whether it's to create change or to grow their business. Basically engage, inspire, convert is what I've been playing with the last couple of days here on Blab. I think I've been on Blab about 55 days now, and
All right.
one thing I jumped in for in terms of joining the room at all is that I've been relatively successful as almost like a co-host runabout around the place. Not always being a co-host, but I guess it was a great example of servant leadership. By being that person serving the rooms, I've got a pretty good following here on Blab because of that ethic, because I've been there to support people, not to just jump out and show people the wrong way to go.
Well, his intentions are far better than mine. I'm glad because the Senators are losing. So
Yeah. Was Nick anxious to get on, or?
well, actually, I had to mute myself for a bit there. I got a little distraction off here to the side that I need to take care of.
Okay.
So I'll open up the seat. Just thought I'd drop in and say hi, Des.
Yeah, Fred,
It's
always
a pleasure.
to have your
Sandy, pleasure.
contribution.
Good to see
Ian,
you,
nice
Fred.
meeting you.
Yeah, we've followed each other before, Fred. We've been in a Blab before, but it must have been some time back.
Yep, roger that. Take care, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye, Ricky.
One comment
So,
Fred just
Nick-
made that I
Nick
thought
still
was
in?
pretty
Nick,
pretty
you want to jump in?
well.
Oh, you've got to go. Okay, fine. Anybody else like to jump in? Just click on the seat. So, Ian, this topic, which I just thought, well, why don't we talk about servant leadership? Because I hear people talking about it and I read about it. In a company like IBM or Telstra, Sandi was saying earlier, Sandi, I think if I quote you correctly, you're a bit ambivalent about the concept in a big corporate context.
I'm ambivalent about the
fair?
concept in the absolute. Nick said there that he doesn't like the adjective servant leadership, and that's part of what I don't like either. I want my leader to lead. Now,
what would you call it? What would you call it if you had to find?
I sort of agree with Fred on that. And it's leadership. It's leadership where your people are valued, where your people are important, where you have your ultimate goal, or as Fred would say, your ultimate mission. But you don't lose sight of the fact that these are humans. I said it earlier. Lead with humanity, and So I would. I don't love the term servant leadership either, because it almost takes away the what I look to a leader for, the strength and the it's okay, I got you.
It's somebody might say, is anybody in charge around here?
Jill just said lead like you mean it, sort of, and I think that I agree with that. Is by definition, if you're a good leader, you're taking care of your people. So
Yeah.
Strong and decisive. Yeah, I agree.
So what about you, Ian? What's your thoughts on this?
It's an interesting concept. I think servant leadership, the term, is an ideal, which is like a spectrum. And you can have servant leadership or you can have dictatorial leadership, practically.
Yeah.
Yep.
Your way or the highway, or it's to support my team. And they are at opposite ends of a spectrum, and neither are fully healthy. And I think in the corporate example, which is where you started that question, there's about my background in IBM and Telstra. I have worked for senior managers who are dictators. There's no people in it. There is in their teams, there is only I.
Yeah.
And there's a time for that sort of leadership. The military is an example where you shall lead. We're trying to do the right thing by people, but there will be collateral damage. Right? Yeah. It's going to happen. So I think the servant leadership is a skill set that helps you put team more up the food chain. You know, maybe not first 100% of the time, but certainly first sometimes. And a good leader knows when to use both, can lead and does lead from the front when it requires that, and supports from behind when the team are engaged and a high performing team, to use that other buzzword.
I think also Sandi and I think we had this conversation, which was about the situation you get you get reported in the media from time to time. Someone was getting beaten up or someone was getting abused, and unfortunately, Ian, in Australia, we've had a couple of instances recently where someone is being racially abused on a tram or a bus, and nobody stepped in and said, just stop that. Or occasionally, thank God, somebody did step in and said, you're out of order. The various studies, I think, have indicated that if one person doesn't step up, there's not going to be a group reaction. But we talked about this last time, I think, Sandi, and you gave the example of the American service people on a train in Europe, the would-be terrorist.
I'm sorry. I was looking at the comments.
Okay. So Sandi gave the example of these, I guess, off-duty military people on a train in Paris, I think it was, and there's a guy with about to do harm to people, and they jumped him, and one of them got injured. But one guy thought we probably should do something, and as he thought it, he turned to his mate who was already moving. So there are some people who are programmed. Or have programmed themselves to take decisive action. And then other people, we talk about leaders and followers, other people are happy to follow once somebody has stepped up.
There's actually, I'm just trying to search for it right now, hence my eyes would have been all over the shop. There's another lady on Blab who runs by the handle something like Shebang. It's a longer name than that. Okay. But she teaches things like self-defense and gun training and personal security, and does pretty well in that niche in America, I believe. And she tells the story. She's actually got a blog post she posted just a few days ago, I think. She was at a conference and someone asked her about, okay, I'm on a plane. Someone does the wrong thing. Do you rush them? Yeah. Do you rush them and take them down or not? And her whole blog post and her answer on the spot was around, you've got a bunch of sheep on a plane. Yeah. You do need some person to stand ahead of that flock of sheep, to take the action. Someone has to step up and take control. And if there is someone like that, you rush them. If you don't have someone like that, you are going to be sheep and no one's going to move. Yeah. You're at that guy's mercy. And it's an interesting parallel to what you're just speaking of. Do you have a leader who's willing to take control and basically confront the offensive, or whether they're going to be placid in the process and go along happily? And it depends on the situation and who's got the guts and who understands the best tactic at that moment. And I think that's another part of this team result we talk about, where a servant leader looks after their team. People have strengths at certain times, and they all have a time to do their part. So yeah, interesting.
There was something you said that just reminded me of like being on a plane when they say if you're not prepared to do what you need to do, then get out of the emergency aisle.
Oh, that's right. When you sit by the window.
And there's some days I sit there and I'm like, yeah, fine, I'll sit here. I need the leg room. And there's other days that they'll say that and I'm like, oh hell, I'm not doing it. But it is. It's like not everybody wants to have to open that door and risk getting trampled by 50 people. And that's a lot of, when you're in that leadership position, you've got to be able to push open that door and know that you're letting everybody else out first. But so it's kind of that yin and that yang, is you've got to have that power and that decisiveness to push open the door and then let other people go first.
I had, and in my younger days, when visiting London, I had a bad experience of somebody who thought he was a leader but wasn't really, because what happened was I went with an Australian friend to a party in London, and there was what happened was that this gang of local thugs turned up and they wanted to gate crash the party, and people didn't want them in there. So one guy who was a friend of this Australian friend of mine said, let's go and sort these people out, So a few people, including myself as younger and stupider, I think, surged forward to go and repel these invaders. And suddenly all hell broke loose, and they were picking up garbage bins and stuff and hurling them. And I behaved quite ignominiously. I hit the dirt, when this garbage tin flying towards me, and I hit my head on the concrete. It was all over in a few minutes, but then ambulances arrived and stuff. I said to my friend later, that guy, your friend, he said, let's go and sort this out, but he was nowhere to be seen. And she said, oh, he always does that. And I said, what are you talking about? He said his father was this big man who used to say, let's go and sort this out, and he did. This guy learned the words, but he just he would get everybody else moving and then disappear. So you've got to be able to walk the talk, I think, not just have the words of leadership.
That's true. You've got to be able to follow through.
Yeah.
And people are looking for that parallel between words and action. And it reminds me of the millennial learning, I guess, I've had around social media. And in our day, Des, in the era younger than
the last century,
we would listen to a brand like Johnson & Johnson, for example, in their industry, and we'd respect the brand. Now, the new folk are looking at Johnson & Johnson and say, I don't care about the company. Who is the CEO and what does he believe in?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, let's put that link in there for...
that's great.
It's now a Twitter friend.
Oh, great. Okay.
You may have an opt-in. Just click past that and you'll see the blog post.
Right. Well, I'm happy to go on a little longer, but not for much longer because I've got to do some other things. Was anybody else like to jump into that seat while we've still got one there? Where am I? I've lost it. Here we go. Ken? No? Right. We've covered a bit of territory, Sandi.
We have.
Well, it's a broad topic. Once you get into leadership and what it is and what it isn't, it's a set of behaviours that drive change, and there's so many ways to do it.
Well, we were talking about it because one of the things that we were talking with Fred is that what I find working with companies now is people will focus on training skills, but they don't focus as much on, we were using the word conditioning because Fred was in here from the military. And, so whether it's conditioning or just that persistence that does get you behavior change as opposed to just transferring skills. And I think that's one of the toughest things that's going on right now is whether it's people don't stay in companies long enough or companies don't commit to their people intimately enough to actually develop them and develop so that they change behavior. I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
I agree. If you look at the industry, like I've grown up in IT, information technology. When I began, we would have thought, not true as it turns out, we would have thought most of those jobs were jobs for life.
Yeah.
So significant commitment on both sides to invest in the relationship and give a lot. The challenge is when that return does not get met. If you're gone within 3 years, that investment is not going to get a return for the employee.
Yeah.
Similarly, the company doesn't get part of set culture.
And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, Sandi and Ian and everybody, that the one of the things I've been reading about kind of attitudes of the way people in leadership, management positions need to, who are older, like baby boomers, for instance, need to understand, even Gen X types, about the millennial generation is that they have to put a bit of extra effort into showing they can be trusted. And that's really hard, where you get sudden decisions by boards of directors or by CEOs to change direction and, as they say, let people go, which means, used to say, fire people, or reallocate them out the door. So it's hard to develop that trust. So you tell me you want me to trust the company, prove that you trust me.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's changing is that companies, if we go back to the vision and mission statements that most companies have, in the old days, they were beacons for argument's sake, 5 to 10 year purposes.
Yeah.
Now they are 1 to 3 years.
Yes.
And typically, a company now, the big corporates, 90%, 95% of our workforce in Australia are in organisations less than 100 people.
Yeah.
Right, there's a significant workforce that will never experience a company that's got a headstrong vision like IBM had. They'll be mostly entrepreneurs or 5-person organisations where they're willing to change direction in 1 year.
Yeah.
So our values that we teach for our culture will be much more short-term. It'll be you get a incentive because we've hit this sales target, and so the culture is sell. Not sell with ethics, sell with long-term ROI, not with long-term customers, all those sorts of things.
And that's part of what we were talking about when we were talking about servant leadership, is if you're not there that long and, it takes a while. And if you're not, how do you build a culture around rewarding people who, by definition, aren't putting themselves in the forefront? And I'm trying to be polite about how to say it, but basically, if you're not selling yourself in your company and you're only, you're there for a short time and you're not making it known that you're hitting your own goals, how do you even progress in that company? And we talked about it. Some companies, definitely the culture is about servant leadership and they're going to recognize it. And those people aren't hanging back in recognition. But in many, many companies where you've got to hit not just annual targets, but quarterly targets, the idea that you're not going to make it known that you're hitting your target as you're coming up is that's a hard one to balance. Of how do you tell somebody, no, it's not about you.
Yeah. But spot the trend.
What?
Right now, we would spend much less time in any organization driving cultural change. What we're doing instead is hire for the culture up front.
Yeah.
We avoid that whole.
As long as you have a strong culture that you know what it is. But to your point, it's that yin and yang. If you're not developing that culture and spending time, I think it's why so many people do struggle. It's like, how do we hire the right people? If when I talk to people, one of the number one challenges is hiring the right people and building that right team. And that goes back to, it's hard to really sit there and know exactly who to hire, because on paper, you can't always tell. It's like when they walk in the room, can you vibe it out? Can you feel that they're going to fit into this culture? And if you haven't spent time on that culture, you won't hire the right person.
Sorry. Jill, just try again, please. I clicked the wrong button. Sorry.
You closed the seat by the looks of it too.
I closed it. Open. Yeah, okay. Now I'll click the right one. I didn't have my glasses on.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Joe.
Hi there.
Hey, Jill.
Hello, nice to meet
you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Where are you calling in from, Jill?
Oh, I'm calling from California.
Oh, me too.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to hop in before you guys, decide to leave, I just wanted to say thank you so much for doing this Blab, because I think that it's really important for, you know, even for future generations to be hearing this type of thing, and you know, shaping people and leaving a legacy for them. I mean, because we're not lately. I have been thinking so much about mortality, and just, you know, like, we have such a short time in this planet, and that what kind of impact are we leaving behind? And not just for our kids. I'm not thinking about my own kids. I'm not married or anything like that, but even for the people around us. Everybody's watching all the time, and now even with Blab, it's blowing up exponentially. And there's so much out there. People are always watching, no matter if it's bad or good. But if there's more good out there, there's more chances of it being absorbed by people. So I really appreciate you guys doing that. I'm just here for support. And
great.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That means a lot.
Well, I'm glad, because I thought it was a conversation worth having, because sometimes we have these words that we use, and then we say, and then I thought, what does that actually mean, you know, in the real world, and what would it mean to different generations, you know? And we are going through this kind of seismic shift with, probably shouldn't use that word to people in California, should I?
We're used to it right now.
But
we just roll with it.
But this movement of tectonic plates culturally, I've done it again. All right, I'll stop. But we are going through a significant period of change in terms of attitudes, because there's this convergence of changes in society, changes in work, changes in technology, and the impact of technology, and all of those things. It's like a perfect storm. And so we look at models of, take the word leadership, models of work leadership, or models of collaboration, you know, and I think we have to be sensitive to the fact that some terms that get used frequently will have different meanings for different people. And what we really should be about is finding a way we can all collaborate for the betterment of, whether it's the planet, our country, our community, school, company, whatever it is. And, you know, not everybody's going to want to buy into this conversation, but I think if there's as much interest as there has been tonight, I'd like to keep it going. Sandy, what do you think?
I'm all for it. I mean, I listen to and Joe, I really appreciate that comment too, because Ian touched on it a little bit. And when you look at millennials, I mean, I worked with tons of them. My kids are. I know it's hard to believe that I have kids who are in the millennial age, but I do. But you know, not to use a trendy word, but I'll use it. It's more of a gig generation. It's like you don't have the benefit of walking in and saying, "Hey, this is home." Well, even a job for life, but even one of the reasons I stayed in my company for years, which I was an anomaly because I was in entertainment advertising and no one stays there, but I did because I felt like it was home. It was a strong culture. It was perfect. It was high standards, but it was also that humanity side of it. People were important. And I knew that was like, when times got tough, if you know, when I had a client screaming at me at 10 o'clock at night, it was that community that I worked with that helped me get through the next day. And with you know, I don't want to coin millennials as if you're off on this island, because it's happening with everybody. Well, but it's happening with everybody today. People don't necessarily have that community,
bigger worldview.
That home that's going to help them get through some of the crap that you have to put up with every day.
And this is one reason I think that employers who say, and I said this earlier, but I think it's worth repeating, employers or managers who have millennials and more, obviously, you know, it's a big generation, numerically bigger than the boomer generation now. If they say, no, you can't use social media at work, you know, you can't You can't use your Facebook account, can't use your Twitter account. It's like saying, come to work and work with one hand tied behind your back, because they're taking them away from their supportive network.
Right.
And they're saying, we don't have, the air conditioning is terrible here. We don't have much oxygen, but just get on with it and work.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of learning has to go on to say, we like the fact that you've got a supportive network. We also want you to recognize that some of your work colleagues are going to think you're just goofing off when you're actually really trying to get some information that might actually help your job.
Mm-hmm.
So it's building that cross-generational awareness is something that I'm very much in favor of cultivating and trying to achieve myself too.
It's great. I'm really encouraged, and I feel like we need more people like you, Des, that that have, keep doing what you're doing. I love it because it gives people inspiration to, if he can speak about, changes and shifts, as passionate as you, then, why not? Just spark that inspiration for other people. And it's not like it's hard. It's awkward because, change is not easy.
Change can be very frightening for a lot of people, Joel, because when I've often said, as an executive and as a consultant later and a coach, I say to people, you executives, you hard driving, ambitious business owners and such, you say change and you get excited. Most of the people working from you are going to say, how am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to keep my kids at school? Whatever it is. So change is a wonderful thing for you, and it's frightening for other people. So you've got to find a way of communicating that this change is going to be beneficial. And for some people, it won't be, in any obvious way, but you'll help them through the process. Anyway, But thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that you're willing to say that, because not everybody would.
No, I appreciate it. And we're here every Thursday, Jill, so I hope you come back.
Yeah. I will, for sure. What time do you guys start, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, we started at 4:45 p.m. your time.
5:45, Jill.
Sorry, 5:45.
California time.
Yeah, I'm in LA, so
Awesome.
I'm right up the street from you. So yeah, we're 5:45 on Thursdays.
Okay, awesome. And thank you so much for having me. And I know that maybe I had struggled with this from before. I'm speaking up and giving my 2 cents or whatnot, but I think I've come to the point in my life where, if there's something good to be said, why not? It's free. Words are free. People use it all the time for bad and good. I'd rather use it for good.
That's great.
No,
Keep that thought.
And you did. I mean, look, Des is a fantastic guy, and I guarantee you've made his day.
I'm glad.
You made my day.
I'll give you an air hug too, Des.
Okay. And the good thing you'll find if you keep coming back is that Sandi and I are very okay with the fact we disagree with one another on various aspects.
We come from a little bit different approaches, but
and that makes it more fun.
But
that's right.
And we're hopefully modeling that you don't have to agree to have a great conversation and a great collaboration.
Yeah,
that's right.
I love it. Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it.
That's great. So I think on that note, we might wind up, Sandi?
Awesome.
I think it's probably a good time.
And